Welcome to Empowering Homeschool Conversations, your authority in navigating the world of homeschooling diverse learners. Featuring Peggy Ployhar from SPED Homeschool, Annie Yorty from AnnieYorty.com, Leilani Melendez from Living with Eve, Stephanie Buckwalter from eLARP Learning, and Dawn Jackson from Dawn Jackson Educational Consulting and Tutoring. With over 75 years of combined homeschooling expertise, experiences, and perspectives, this group is eager to share their wealth of wisdom to empower your homeschooling journey. So grab your favorite mug, settle in, and get ready for insightful discussions, valuable insights, and practical tips. Give your homeschool the power boost it needs to successfully educate the unique learners in your home.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Empowering Homeschool Conversations. I'm your host, Peggy Ployhar, and today's episode is one you're not going to want to miss. If you have a child who struggles to get words on paper or even struggles to communicate their thoughts out loud, you're not alone, and you're in the right place. Today's conversation is called Helping Your Child Find Their Words on Paper and in Life, and I'm thrilled to be joined by someone who has a lifeline to so many homeschool families, Julie Bogart. Julie is a creator of the award-winning Brave Writer program and founder of the Brave Learner Home community, author of The Brave Learner and Raising Critical Thinkers, and the host of Brave Writer podcast. Her work has touched tens of thousands of families who, like you, want their children to not just write better, but think and communicate more confidently in every part of life. If today's topic resonates with you, be sure to check out our community at Homeschool Heroes, powered by SPED Homeschool at spedhomeschool.com, where we offer even more resources to support you on this journey. Now let's dive into this important and encouraging conversation. Welcome, Julie.
Hi, Peggy. That was an amazing intro. Thank you.
Oh, absolutely. So just love having you here. I know this is a struggling area for many parents, was a struggling area when I was homeschooling my own children, just writing. And it seems more and more that parents are just looking for good resources, people who know what they're talking about. And so I'm super excited to have you on the show today to just give us some insight, encourage parents, let them know, especially that they're not alone. That's very helpful.
Very helpful. Very important. You know, the thing about writing is that for a lot of people, they did not have a positive experience learning to write. A lot of adults, I meet them at my conferences.
That's true.
They act very happy when I'm in the room. And then all of a sudden I'll say, okay, so let's try a little writing. And all the energy goes, it's like they went from being this animated, happy homeschool parent to the child who got a C on a report in 5th grade. And one of the unacknowledged aspects of teaching writing is how much damage many adult writers have not metabolized from their own childhoods. So what ends up happening is we come to the subject of writing tense. We're like, I don't want my child to suffer, but I also don't want them to make any mistakes because mistakes lead to that suffering. If they make a mistake, someone has to correct it, and correcting mistakes feels terrible. So what actually happens, what oddly happens, is that parents double down on the very methods that caused harm to them on their own kids. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so that's why that's why teaching writing can be kind of high stakes.
Yeah. I think we do that in any subject, really. But writing seems to be one of those, I think, that we were all kind of under the pressure to almost do perfect the first time, and that mistakes weren't allowed to, and it suppressed our creativity. And in the process, we just think that we're bad at it.
Well, part of the problem is writing gets taught like it's a subject rather than a tool of self-expression. And the fact is that self-expression is a right of all human beings. I mean, we would never say to our child, when you're learning to speak, I will only speak back to you if you put all the words in the right order and conjugate all the verbs correctly. I tell a little mock story in my book of how when my oldest son was 11 months old, we were living in Morocco at the time. He was sitting in a chair behind me and I heard him say Nana. And what I like to say at conferences is, and then I turned around and I said, oh, honey, What a good try. Nana is a part of a word. The word is banana. It's a noun. It goes in a sentence like this: I would like a banana. And because it's a request, you need to use the oral format called etiquette. So what I really need to hear is, I would like a banana, mama, please. Do we say that to an 11-month-old? We do not. But that's a little bit how we teach writing. Like the child
Exactly.
blurts out on the page, I hate Pokemon. And we're like, but you were supposed to write about, the warbler that we saw at the bird feeder. And instead of being interested in, oh, this was self-expression, something came out of my child that they felt was valuable enough to commit to a page or commit to a screen. Let's pursue that further. Instead of doing that, we teach kids to dissociate from the things they want to communicate and try to guess what lives in your imagination so you'll be happy. And you know what? If you've ever tried to mind read and guess like your spouse, that's torture. Nobody wants to do that.
That's so true. Yes. That those are some great perspectives for us to have as we, go into this topic, because it kind of blows a lot of things out of the water as to how we're going to approach this topic.
Right.
And I hope, for those of you that are going, well, should I stay around for the conversation? I hope that that's a good enough teaser to say, oh yeah, this is a worthwhile conversation. Stay here, because you're going to learn something that that you're probably not going to find in most curriculums, or especially what you pull out of your past. So it may just reform your thinking about writing. And in that process, what are some common myths that parents might believe about kids who struggle with writing?
The main one is that if your child isn't a good reader and can't handwrite well or spell and punctuate well, they can't be a good writer. One of the things I like to say about writing, whether it's an adult or a child, is, and I say this playfully, even though what's about to follow is a bit violent imagery. If I could gouge out your eyes and chop off both your hands, you could still be a writer. Writing is not tied to the mechanics. The mechanics are what I call transcription. It is the tool you use to take the thoughts that live in your mind and make them permanent and visible, right? That's the only goal of transcription. But writing is not that. If you have nothing to say, there's nothing to transcribe, right? We're not just writing words that live in the air. We're writing the words that live inside of us. And the first connection that a child needs to make is that the writer is already in residence. One of the ways that we do that in Brave Writer that I recommend is to catch your child in the act of spontaneous self-expression. So what does that look like? You're at the table, you're setting it up for dinner, and your child comes bounding in from outside and they say, Mom, our dog was chasing a squirrel. And they run off into this crazy little story. And as you notice their passion, you just stop what you're doing. You grab, the back of an envelope, a supermarket receipt, whatever you have handy. And you just, without a word, start jotting down their exact words on their behalf. Most kids, when they see you doing that the first time, they're like, what are you doing? And you say back, you know what? This is so interesting. I don't want to forget what you're saying. So I'm writing it down. And then you capture as much of their freely offered language, spontaneous self-expression, as close to their words as you can, because they're going to talk faster than you can transcribe. So just do the best you can. And then that night at dinner, I want you to pull that back out and say to the family, Sean was telling me all about Rocky chasing a squirrel in the backyard. I was afraid I'd forget it, so I wrote it down. I just want to read you what he told me because it was so good. And in that moment, the child experiences themselves as a writer, not because they transcribed it, but because it was transcribed. And later, when you ask them to write, they start to know that that's what you're expecting to see on the page, this natural, verbal, self-expressive person. Of course, you can take that piece of writing and toss it in the library basket and then read it regularly over the next month alongside other books you're reading. But the goal is to begin to help the child identify as an author, as a writer, as a person with valuable thoughts before we start saying, make sure you spell them correctly.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. That can all be fixed later. And I think we feel like if they don't do it right the first time, that they're going to be damaged, in their writing. And it's how we teach other subjects, because like math, we know that if you repeat something too often, it will stick. But we're talking about imagination. We're talking about something different.
I would challenge that, honestly.
Really?
Oh yeah. Because here's the thing. There's research that shows that when you make a mistake and then you figure out how to correct it for yourself, that learning sticks better than rote practice that is more automatic. Like, okay, I know all my twos, times tables, right? Sometimes what we miss is the opportunity for a child to grow when they make that spelling error or that math problem mistake. But here's why. We're used to a teacher model where a teacher comes in and they correct it. They're like, well, this was wrong, this was wrong, this was wrong. Do you know, I make a joke about homeschool and math, and this is what I say. There's no homeschooled child who has ever missed a math problem, because the second they miss it, their mother is like, well, let's rework that problem. That does not happen in school. In school, you just get 3 wrong. So maybe if we're evaluating school, they keep making the same mistake, but that's not what's happening at home. What's happening at home is the parent is seeing it, and now they're talking about it, and now they're working on it. With writing, we do something similar. We have kids learn the mechanics of writing using somebody else's writing. We have them do copy work and dictation with passages from literature where their full attention can be trained on putting a period where it goes, starting a sentence with a capital, spelling the word because correctly. They don't have to think the original thoughts. But when they are done doing the copy work or the dictation, I don't have the parent do the correcting. The child goes back and compares their original to their own work, right? They're looking at the passage and they're making those correspondences so that they can internalize that correction, right?
Right.
If we expect them to grow their writing skills, their transcription skills from their own writing, they have nothing to compare it to. They are offering you their current capacity. So to tell them they did it wrong doesn't help them grow. And it's also not sticking because they don't have it yet. So we go back to these other practices and allow them to do that self-correcting. And then it gets internalized and it will eventually be borrowed into their own writing. So I value the mechanics deeply. I just don't like the way they're taught in most settings. Yeah.
So true. And good advice too there. So what about kids who have had meltdowns already over writing? We've gotten to that point and parents are like, is there any turning back?
I mean, there really is, but it has to start with an apology. The reason kids freak out with writing is that they have failed to live up to your expectations. That's plain and simple. If you have told your child, I can't believe you're still not using capitals at the beginning of sentences, you're going to hurt their feelings. They're like, I just told you a brand new ending to Star Wars, and all you're noticing is that I forgot some capital letters. That literally hurts their feelings. So when we get obsessed with how the writing looks rather than what the writing says, our children start to suffer. And what they're doing is when they say they hate writing, they're saying to you, I don't want to risk having my feelings hurt. That's all they're saying, because every child loves self-expression. In fact, I would argue that the internet proved that kids love writing. The first thing they did when they threw open the doors of the internet in the 1990s and early 2000s, kids got live journals. They got MySpaces. They're like, I want to write. I want to write for the whole world. I want to be read. So writing is not the issue. It is the way we evaluate and teach writing. It's this pressure we're putting on children to perform at a level where they haven't developed those skills. And what they need instead is this supportive environment. So the apology goes like this. Sweetie, I heard this lady talking about writing, and I realized I've hurt your feelings a lot, the way that we do writing together. And I really feel badly about it because obviously I think you're delightful. I spend 24 hours a day with you. I want to hear all your stories. I want to talk to you about all the facts about roller coasters or World War II tanks or slugs. I'm interested in all of it. And yet here I've made you feel like you can't even do it on paper. So can we start over? And I want your input each step of the way. What feels good, what feels painful. And we're going to use this other kind of program. My program, the Growing Brave Writers, which is our curriculum, starts with an activity that has no writing to teach about the experience of writing. Like we've got to reset the energy that we bring to this activity. And I need you to write too. Parents need to take the same writing risks with their children. They need to be at the table with their own paper, showing what that is, showing how it's done.
And that's a great point, because we only can model what we do. And if we don't experience it ourselves, we're not going to be able to be as excited or be able to really show our children that it's worth the effort if we don't put it in ourselves.
Yes. And it will cultivate your empathy, because you're going to feel nervous. I'll tell you that right now. You're going to write something and think, this is stupid. I shouldn't share it with my kids. And that's the moment you'll realize, wait, that's how they feel. And you can actually be that brave person who goes first. And you can even narrate your own experience. Gosh, I thought I had a great idea, and then I started writing it, and now I think it wasn't a great idea. I wonder what you guys will think. Help me out. And here's the amazing thing. Kids never criticize. They're the most generous feedback givers on the planet. You're going to write something you feel doubtful about, and they're going to tell you it was great. Hello, learn from that. That's exactly what they needed. They need you to read their writing, not like an evaluator, but like a reader, like someone who is wanting to be entertained, wanting to be informed. Right.
Yeah. So true. That's and we just have to be willing to step outside that box that we feel so comfortable in, to just be willing to try those things and to see what happens, because we kind of feel happy in our little safe spaces, especially as parents, and we feel like, I can take this book out, we can do our school, and then we put it back away, and I'm not threatened as a teacher, as a parent. But I've had so many conversations with homeschool moms that this is a growth process for us as well as our kids, and we have to embrace that. Yes. And so thank you for adding that extra element that we've never talked about is writing and that. So what about like daily practices, making this a habit?
Yeah.
How do families do that?
So one of the writing myths I like to bust is write every day. Like there are lots and lots of courses that say you should write every day if you're going to grow as a writer. This is advice given to professional writers all the time. And I've worked with professional writers. I was a ghostwriter, a magazine editor, a freelance writer and editor for 10 years before I started Brave Writer. But I like to say it's not that you should write every day. It's that you should interact with writing every day. So some days it's reading. Some days it is editing. Some days it is free writing. Some days it's research. You are going to spend time growing your writing voice and the sound of writing, as well as the activity. So in Brave Writer, we recommend free writing on Fridays, alliteration, Friday free write. But it can be any day of the week. And free writing is the practice of setting the timer and allowing everybody to simply move their pencil for that entire amount of time. So anywhere from 3 to 5 minutes to start, building up to 7 to 10 or 15 minutes. And the goal of it is to get comfortable hooking up the hand with the mind, literally taking dictation from the ticker tape of your own thought lives. So as you're writing, you are getting more skilled at keeping pace. Your hand starts out slower than your thoughts, right? That's part of the logjam for kids. They're trying to keep up with their thoughts. So they're going to write things that they can manage, like roller coasters are awesome. They're not going to say, when I climbed in the plastic seat of the roller coaster, I felt the clamp hit my hips in a cold way. They're not going to do that.
Right.
So what we're trying to help them do is get used to the feeling of transcribing their thoughts. And then they can share them. They can read it aloud. I don't recommend reading their handwriting after a free write because you will make ugly facial expressions instead of being delighted by the content. And this is where I invite parents to write at the same time. And you can start by making it private writing that no one ever reads. Okay. And when no one's ever going to read it, they're more likely eventually to write something that means something to themselves. You can do that for weeks. You can just free write every week. Nobody reads each other's writing. Eventually, create the invitation. Would you like to read what you wrote? I would love to hear it if you would. Here's what I wrote. Who else would like to read theirs? The option is always on the table. During the other days of the week, I want you reading aloud. I want you to try copy work. That's the practice of copying word for word a passage from a book, including punctuation. I want you to try dictation, where you're reading that passage aloud and your child is now transcribing it themselves. And then I want us to do one sort of writing project a month, what most people call a writing assignment. So maybe you're building a lap book, or you're creating a homonym book, or you're writing a mini report. And these take 4 weeks. There's got to be a week of research, a week of a bunch of free writes, the third week sort of correlating those or collating those together, revising them a little bit, and then the last week mopping up the mechanics. And that's really the whole writing practice, you know, the components of it, the way we do it in Brave Writer.
Right. Yeah, that's it makes it seem so easy, you know, versus
doesn't have to be hard.
It does. And yeah, I had struggling writers, my own kids, but they struggled to read as well. Mm-hmm. And so we did a lot of audiobooks, and I was really surprised, and we did read out louds too. I was really surprised at how much they learned grammar and vocabulary.
Absolutely.
Through the things that we were doing while we kind of just plodded through the mechanics very slowly and not really pushing hard. I didn't want to break my kids, you know, and that was when I was able to see that as my goal, and that we were just doing what we could do. It just put everything at ease, and my kids got it in their time.
Yes. And, you know, if we think about how kids learn to speak, that's a really good model for us, because we were so generous with their mistakes. We were so enthusiastic. We were willing to model things, to try them over a long period of time. And I think we treat writing like it is some external skill, when the only thing that is the transcription skills. And so when people tell me, you know, I have an 8-year-old, she's a bad writer, I don't actually know what they mean. Do they mean they don't like her handwriting? Do they mean she's not spelling all the words correctly? Do they mean she doesn't know how to write an expository essay? Usually they mean she doesn't know how to spell or punctuate, or her handwriting's bad at 8. And I always say, but she just started. She barely knows how to read. Like, it takes 5 years to become a fluent speaker. It takes 10 years to become a fluent writer, because the skill is not innate. The brain actually has to be trained and learn it. But imagine telling a child who has fluent speech that they're a bad writer. They're not. They're an amazing writer. It's just they don't have the transcription skills to keep up yet. So that's the thing we want our children to know. Hey, don't worry. You know, at age 12, they're still making a ton of spelling errors. They're only halfway through that journey. It goes from 8 to 18, right? Like, we expect way more of our children than they can give us. And then we wonder why they get discouraged. They know what they can give. So what I always like to say is, come back to what they give. Notice what works. Notice what impacts you. I love reading a child's writing and being able to say, you love roller coasters? You think they're awesome? Tell me more about awesome. Not, this isn't very detailed. I need more descriptive terms. Those are very different, right? One is the energy of being a reader. You think roller coasters are awesome. I know that word is hiding so many experiences you could tell me about, versus you aren't writing well. You didn't think about this topic correctly. You didn't show me that you studied it well enough yet. We have to move into that relational kind of practice with writing, because their little hearts are so vulnerable in a way that they aren't with a math worksheet, right? They get
Right, 'cause
seven
it's so
times eight
personal.
wrong.
Yeah.
That's something you can work on, but it doesn't have anything to do with what they're trying to communicate.
Absolutely. Yeah. One closes a door and one opens a door. And I think if we see it that way, then it's it helps us to be able to pull those things out of them that they're not seeing. It's like when a child tells a small bit of a story when they're young, they just expect that you know what's in their head. And it isn't until you say, well, I'm not getting the full picture here. What is involved, that they realize, oh, there's more I can say instead of just that one word. And
Yeah. And, the thing is, professional authors, we throw away a ton of words and we write way more words than we need. But my first drafts are always very empty, right? They build over time because you just got to get something on the page. It's like asking a child to make something with Play-Doh and you don't give them any. Like, you got to get some Play-Doh out of the containers, right?
Right.
And you're going to go through various iterations, because to become precise in what you want to communicate, you have to try a few things. If you've ever thought about a scary conversation, think about trying to talk to your spouse about a way that they're disappointing you. Okay, let's just imagine that. Don't you rehearse it in the shower and when you're going on your run? And don't you call your girlfriend and explain your justifications for this point of view long before you risk telling it to the spouse of yours that you love, right? And then even then you're like revising in the moment. You see their facial expression and you're changing to modify so it doesn't hurt their feelings, right? So kids are doing that with writing, and we need to receive it as an attempt at communication, not demonstration of a skill.
Yeah.
That the demonstration of a skill puts you in the wrong mindset. Practice in the mirror. Have a pleasing look on your face, please.
Can you talk a little bit about editing and revising? Because we've come kind of diving into that. And, it's great when they get all these words there, but then how do we help them to kind of get it to a point where it can be expressed in a way that other people are going to receive it, just like that conversation?
Absolutely. No, that's a fantastic question. And that's where the writing relationship with parents or teachers often breaks down. I like to define revision as the act of giving new vision to the piece, like enriching it, enhancing it, making it more than what it started as, adding to it, adding detail, content. So it's like the first draft is like a map to where you want to go. Revision is where you want to go. It's actually taking the journey. Okay. Editing is finding all the little mechanical mistakes, the typos, the spelling errors, the missing punctuation, the paragraphing. So I save editing for the very last step, because for some reason, when we correct the wording, the spelling and the punctuation, kids don't feel read. So they think the content wasn't good. They have this weird thing where if you say, oh, you left the E off the end of the word house, to them, that means you didn't like the paper. So we don't do that until the very, very, very end. And by the time you've thoroughly read it and revised it, kids are ready to mop up their own mechanics, to go back in, and they will actually see the things that they know they need to fix.
They're invested in it.
Yes, but also the things they don't see means they don't know how to do them yet. So how can we hold them accountable for stuff they don't know? Right. But we never know if they know, because we do the correcting. We don't allow them to have that first pass. Okay, so that's editing. But here's how I like to think about revision. Have you ever thought about what it feels like to read a book you love? When you're reading it, are you thinking, how could this have been written differently? You're not. You're invested in what the writer is telling you, whether it's an op-ed for the New York Times or it's your favorite Emily Henry romance novel, right? It doesn't matter which thing it is. When you feel compelled by the content, you are drawn forward by your interest, by your curiosity to see what comes next. You are not reading it with an evaluator's mind, which is looking for mistakes. Unfortunately, the school model is evaluation oriented. Homeschoolers don't have to be. Right. They live with their children. You have a relationship. Your job is to give your child the unmatched experience of being read. We love to be read. This is why everybody is on Threads and Twitter and Instagram and TikTok. We want our ideas heard, seen, known, and we want credit for them. We want someone to say, thumbs up. I'm giving you a heart. I agree. I'm going to stitch your work into mine. Like, that is literally what human beings crave. And then in school, we act like, no, that's irrelevant. It's the most important thing you can do. So when you're reading your child's writing for revision, here's what you first do. On the first read, you look for the way it's landing in your body and you affirm all the things that are working. So you say words like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad you're writing about roller coasters. I remember when we went, to Cedar Point last summer. This is going to be good. So that's after the opening line, which you're going to revise later, which says roller coasters are awesome. But you're letting your child know, I'm going on this journey with you. Then the next line is talking about this one roller coaster, and it's giving you some factual details that this kid has learned on his own that you didn't even know he knew. So you say back, oh my gosh, when did you find out how tall that roller coaster is or how fast it is? I'm so glad you told me that information up front. Those are good facts. So you start naming the techniques they're using.
Yes.
Those are good facts that go with this topic. Then you talk about, oh my gosh, you're describing the wind in your hair. Immediately, I felt my hair. Like, oh, yes, that is what happens on a roller coaster. Good descriptive detail. That really helped me be in the roller coaster with you. So we go through and we just read it as a reader, and we give this sort of positive feedback. On the second pass, the goal is to ask for more, not to fix, change, correct. We're not going to say no passive voice, not enough detail. Tell me more about, why didn't you talk about your 5 senses? No, instead, we're going to say, okay, I love this opening that roller coasters are awesome because I know immediately that you value roller coasters. But the word awesome, tell me more about it. I think there is more behind that word, and I kind of want to know what it is. Or, you led me down this path where I was like nervous. You're writing about whatever the story is. I was nervous. And then I never did get to find out what happened. Did you want to add that here? I'm dying to know. So you're putting yourself in the position of an eager reader, not a cruel evaluator, right? And weirdly, you can do that for everything. You can ask for more. You can say, I want to see what you see in your mind's eye. You took me to the beach, but now I want to see what you're seeing. What are you seeing? And while your child is telling you, you can jot that down for them and then hand it back and say, see if that can be incorporated. I think that really enriches the original. Use that kind of language. You will be shocked. Kids love that collaboration.
Yeah. That's great. That's great advice. Because you're teaching them how somebody else sees it, just what they can pull out. And I found too that when I dictated and wrote things down for my kids, that if they didn't know how to spell it, all of a sudden they had the proper spelling right there in front of them for something that maybe they were like, I'm not going to write that down because I don't know how to spell that word. And then all of a sudden you have that word written right on their paper and they're like, oh, I can just copy it. I mean, go from there.
That's so true. And it brings up a really good point. A lot of kids dumb down the content of their writing to match their mechanics because they don't want to get in trouble for making a mistake. But I would much rather have a mess of spellings if my child is using words like superfluous and victorious and cornucopia. I don't want them to just say big, small, let them express what they're capable of. And tell them the mechanics are the least interesting part, especially today. Grammar and spell check are awesome. I rely on them constantly. I've learned words like accommodate. I did not ever remember if it's 2 C's, 2 M's, but I've written it so many times in the context of spell check. I now know it's 2 C's and 2 M's. AI is coming. I wrote a whole chapter about that in my book, Help My Kid Hates Writing. What is its proper use? How is it helping or harming the writing journey? But everything is in revolution right now. And the way that we get behind is to be punitive of our children. That's how we get behind. How we stay ahead is to be curious, interested, celebratory, acting like readers, making use of this huge world of the internet that has created global publishing. literally more children today are writing for readers. And I mean any kind of readers, whether it's a text message or, a social media post, than in the history of the planet.
Absolutely.
I mean, just think about that. So we're saying we're in this writing crisis. No, we're not. Kids love to write. They just don't want to write at school where people are mean. That's it.
Right. I love that. So you talk a lot about critical thinking in relation to writing. How are those two related? For especially, our community has families whose kids struggle in a lot of areas. And we think, well, our children struggle, in just being able to make the right decisions too. So how does that help them as they go through this process of being able to express themselves?
Critical thinking is directly related to writing because it's related to self-awareness. Critical thinking starts with self-knowledge, the capacity to recognize your own bias as it kicks into gear, the way that you form your thoughts, the communities that shape your thinking, the authorities you trust, the values you're protecting and defending against others. And without that self-awareness, if you think critical thinking is just being critical of the other guy, your mind doesn't grow. You aren't becoming a critical thinker. What you're doing is you're becoming an apologist for a viewpoint. A good example of this is even in the homeschooling community. If you are simply defending homeschooling all the time and not really actually interested in what a person in a school system might say about school, then you aren't growing your capacity to be curious about education on the whole. You're just doubling down on your own point of view. So for kids, writing, and for adults, connects us to why we think what we think. And a lot of times, I don't know about you, but when I go to write something, it's not what I thought. Like writing clarifies or changes my thinking. It literally takes me into the cul-de-sac where I get stuck and I don't have a thoroughfare. I'm like, well, actually, that is not very clear. And also, it's not very logical. So when I'm thinking my own thoughts, I feel so cozy and comfortable. Like, yeah, this feels like old jeans. But then when I go to write it, it's like showing up at a wedding in old jeans. Like, I actually gotta get that outfit together a little more effectively, right? I've got to put my whole look together. So critical thinking starts there. The other piece that writing does is it gives us the opportunity to play with viewpoints the way we might try on dress-up clothes or act in a play. We can pretend to believe something we don't believe to see if we can build a logical argument for that belief so that we can actually investigate it, be interested in it, be curious about why people hold it. The temptation in our culture is to vilify what we don't agree with, instead of recognizing that people who don't share our views have the same allegiance to their own perspective that we have to ours. And the way that we build better communities, better public policy, is to include as many viewpoints as possible to account for more than just mine. So even though I might have a strong view, how can I build a coalition of people and broaden how we understand this idea so that more people are a part of the solution, not just protecting my group against yours? And I think for homeschoolers in particular, we tend to be a little self-protecting and defensive because we are in the minority population of education. We've been disparaged. We've been, there have been laws written against us. Like that's all part of this defensive posture. But that does not serve you over the long haul. What serves us over the long haul is caring about education, the big category, and then creating room for home education. And so for our kids, same thing. They can start with caring about roller coasters and then work their way down to safety, right? Safety as a part of that experience, not just the thrill, right? So I think that's how writing and thinking all get tied up together.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you have to evaluate yourself when you write, because at some point it gets read back to you and then you realize, is that really what I'm thinking?
Yes.
And then there's conversations usually over writing too. And so it's a back and forth thing instead of just that child, giving their one-sided point of view.
That's right. And there should be research involved, right? Part of,
Yes,
especially as you
exactly.
get into
Clear learning
academic
as well.
writing, you're
Mhm.
researching and you are comparing viewpoints and you are attempting to narrate faithfully a viewpoint rather than, sneaking in a trick criticism, right? Those are all really valuable skills. And I do have a book called Raising Critical Thinkers that I think is super helpful for parents. And then a workbook called Becoming a Critical Thinker that teens can do for themselves. And that's for like 12 to 18-year-olds. Very powerful tool. And as an adult, you're going to want to do some of those activities. I just know it once you start reading because they're challenging. They're really, really good for our brains.
Yeah. We're always growing. We never stop. So it's just great that you have those resources, because I think we feel like, well, I've arrived. We never quite arrive. So
no, never.
Absolutely. And I think, a lot of our parents, they say, well, my child's significantly behind, and that's our community. What encouragement do you have for them?
Yeah. So here's one of the joys of homeschooling. We don't really have to care about grade level,
Absolutely.
We want to be on the journey with our child. And we want to give the child in front of us our full attention, not the child somebody else has, but the child we have. So here's what I like to say to parents. If you're concerned, if you're feeling like, my child is struggling with handwriting or reading or chronic spelling issues, go get help. Triangle in support. Find a speech and language pathologist in your community. Go get an evaluation. I know I had a son with dysgraphia, and we used a local speech and language pathologist who met with him for 2 years. And here's what she said to me. And I want to say this to homeschoolers in particular. She said, I love working with homeschool mothers because I give them the therapies and they literally go home and do them with their kids. Yep. When I do that with public school moms, they don't have time. Their kids are gone all day. They come home with homework. They're tired. They don't want to sit down and do them. You will make so much progress with your child because you have daytime available to implement the tools and strategies a specialist will give you. And those are valuable and you don't know them. So go get those tools and skills if you have any niggling doubt. And if they confirm to you that your child is doing fine, phew, think about that sigh of relief. Right. The second thing I'll say is this: you're not in a rush. I know with my son who had dysgraphia, I did this jotting it down practice for him for years. His handwriting, he was a lefty on top of it, was really pretty atrocious. And so he really struggled. So we did other things. He drew maps because he was into gaming. He liked keeping a bird list, his life bird list. He found out that has to be in your own handwriting or it doesn't count. So he's over there watching birds, writing them down. And that was a time that he was willing to commit the effort. But then when he was in junior high, I just decided with him that we would do an extra year. And that included this therapy for his handwriting. So he went to high school a year later, did 2 years of 8th grade, basically. Although we didn't call it that. We're just like, let's take another year before you start high school. Right. And then he took a year after high school to not go to college. So he started college at 20. Today, he's a self-taught software engineer and IT specialist at Procter & Gamble. Like, it all works out. He was 20 when he started college. Like, you're not in a hurry. Give your kids the time they need and the skills they need, and care about it as a skill, not as catching up to some other kid.
Yeah, I love that. Yes, that's so true in every area, that our kids are not on a timeline. And in many states, we can homeschool past 18. You are not, there's no legal requirement that says your child has to graduate at 18, 20. It's all based on funding that high schools graduate students. So if you're not getting funded, don't worry about it.
Yeah, 100%. And your child is going to tell you anyway. My oldest, I have 5 kids. My oldest kid, midway through high school, is like, I'm done with all of it. I don't want to do homeschool. We joke all the time, did you homeschool, unschool, whatever? I said, I had an anti-schooler. He didn't want any kind of schooling.
I had one of those too.
Yeah. And he's 38 today with 3 kids. And he's like, and I still hate it when like my company has trainings. Like, I hate school. Let me be alone and do the thing I need to do. So, some of this is treating your child like they're a human being, not like a product for education. They're not a product. They're a person. Get to know them, trust the process, believe in your own powers. You are capable of guiding this child.
Absolutely. Yes. Can you tell us a little bit about Brave Writer and just what our viewers and listeners can find on there?
Yeah. Brave Writer is my company. It's 25 years old. We've taught hundreds of thousands of families. Basically, what we do is we offer digital downloadable curricula for all the different stages of development in writing. And then we also have online classes that you can sign up with your kids. We enroll the parent with the children for some of our classes because we know that the parent needs to be trained, not just the child. These classes.
And I read some of the reviews on your website.
Oh, good.
And the parents are so excited that they're learning as well, and they feel equipped.
No, they're really into it. And our classes run anywhere from 3 to 6 weeks. So they don't take up your whole semester. They're asynchronous. Awesome. There's a real teacher, but you don't have to log in on Tuesday at 10 a.m. And our students just become passionate about writing because we're not there to evaluate and grade. We're there to grow. And they do.
That's awesome. Yeah. So that's at bravewriter.com. And that link will be in the show notes. So you don't have to figure out how to even spell it. We'll have it there for you. So you can just click on it. Absolutely. Well, I've appreciated your time today, Julie, and your willingness to share with us. It has been enlightening and encouraging for sure. And you brought so much truth to this topic and for parents who are walking this road with their kids. It's been very practical too, not just academic. And I think, it's helping our kids to find that path to discover kind of their unique voice. And that's what it's all about.
When I wrote Help My Kid Hates Writing, the parent I had in mind was the one whose child delights them, but is in that crisis of, I don't want to write. And the parent is feeling helpless. And maybe you've yelled at that child. Maybe you've said, we can't have lunch till you've written 3 sentences, right? Like we've all done that. This book will transform how you understand what writing is, what your role is in it. And it gives you just a slew of practical, actionable tasks that you can do together. And if you have a kid who loves writing, that's okay too, because you may be wondering, how do I prevent ruining it for them? Like I want to give feedback, but I'm afraid I will ruin writing. It's also for you. These strategies work with kids of all different, relationships to writing. And I really hope that it will bring a lot of freedom and liberation and healing to the adults who read it. Yeah.
So can people find that book on your website? Or
they can. It's also available anywhere that books are sold, but I have an author website as well, juliebogartwriter.com.
Okay.
And so all my books are there as well. Yeah. If you put that on the show notes, that would be great.
Okay.
juliebogartwriter.com.
I will definitely make sure to do that.
Good. Awesome. Thank you, Peggy. This was great.
Yeah. This was so fun. I appreciate it. And I'm always learning something new. So thank you for teaching me as well.
Awesome.
I have to be a lifelong learner as well. Even though my kids have graduated, I love that, we can continue to empower the homeschool community just by sharing words of wisdom from experienced and
parents love it.
People like you.
Yeah, they love it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, to those of you listening, remember you don't have to do this journey alone. At Homeschool Heroes, powered by SPED Homeschool, you'll find a community ready to walk alongside you with resources, encouragement, and real connection. So visit us at spedhomeschool.com to learn more and become part of the movement that empowers parents just like you. And make sure also to check out Julie's websites. We'll make sure that both of them are in the show notes. And if you found today's conversation helpful, make sure that you subscribe, share the episode with a friend, and leave a review. Every connection we make helps us strengthen families and empower more children to find their voice on paper and in life. And until next time, know that you're a cherished part of our Homeschool Heroes family. Together, we will grow, learn, and lift each other up. And we're so thankful to have you on this journey. Take care, everybody. God bless. Thanks again, Julie, and have a great day.
This has been Empowering Homeschool Conversations, provided by SPED Homeschool, a nonprofit that empowers families to home educate diverse learners. To learn more, visit spedhomeschool.com